Well, welcome to Christian Answers. This is Pastor Jeff Short. Glad to have you along for the journey today. Boy, what topic we have today. We're continuing to talk about the spiritual warfare that we're battling here in society right now in the United States post the 2020 elections. We are seeing lies, deception, gaslighting, mind control, spiritual manipulation, spiritual warfare, and I just wanted to outline some of the aspects of this spiritual warfare. Now, I know a lot of Christians right now are saying it's just too much for me. I can't deal with it. I think I'm just going to go and deal with the regular everyday issues of how to stay above float of the water, how to be a better me, how to do a better family, how to be better at work, how to do this, that, and the other. And a lot of churches are doing that. They're just going on as if there's nothing going on in society. There's no problem. This is just business as usual in our nation and our government and our society. And they're just kind of living in denial that there's any spiritual intense warfare going on right now. But we are going through one of the most spiritually intensive warfare times that I have ever seen in my entire life. You turn on the television, you want to sit down and watch a little bit of television news. You can't do that. Why? Because every other news segment, if it talks about some controversial subject, some item of news from politics or culture, it is going to be misinformation. It's going to be fake news. You can't even make it through an entire broadcast without just shutting down the TV and saying, this is crazy. This is patently false information. And I know it's false because I can do my own research and know that it's false. But we're being gaslit. And that's a term that comes from a movie back about 5 or 6 decades ago in which a man is trying to convince his wife that she's crazy. And so she'll say, I saw something outside. I saw a light outside. Oh, you didn't see anything outside. You must be dreaming. Are you tired? Or have you had enough to eat? You must be delusional. In other words, someone trying to convince someone else that they're crazy. And it's very easy in this era of intense spiritual warfare to actually question your sanity. And it's that way with the election of 2020. We see all kinds of fraud, irregularities, broken rules, broken laws, eyewitnesses testifying to the fact that they were bullied, they were kicked out of the observation room, they saw handling the ballots irregular, just on and on and on. Eyewitness first-hand testimony that this election was not legit. And yet, when you tune in on the news, mainstream media, CNN, ABC, CBS, NPR, all the basically cable networks, even now Fox News is pretty much saying, hey, let's just move on past this election. Yeah, there might be some irregularities, but nothing big. Let's just get on to other topics. It's too controversial. It's too hot for us. Let's just go on. You cannot get a straight answer out of people today. And today we're going to be analyzing how this is part of a spiritual warfare. It's not just what is on the physical material level. It is a spiritual component here. We know that there are spiritual forces behind what is visible. We know that the visible is not the only reality. In fact, it's only a small aspect of the total reality. We know that from the Bible. We know that there is a spiritual realm. We know that God and angels and departed saints live in eternity in heaven with God. And we also know that there are fallen angels and led by none other than Satan himself, who are trying to sow confusion, doubt, disbelief, and violence and actual death on this planet Earth. He's done it all throughout the ages. He's doing it now, and he's really doing it a lot intensely now. And I just wanted to point out a verse that you may be familiar with, but maybe you don't know about this verse. It's in Ephesians 6, and it's talking about in verse 10, where it says, finally be strong in the Lord and in his mighty power. Put on the full armor of God so that you can take your stand against the devil's schemes. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood or the physical or the material world, but against rulers, against authorities, against powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms, or in the spiritual realms, if you want to put it that way. And then it says, therefore, put on the full armor of God, the spiritual armor, so that when the day of evil comes, you may be able to stand your ground, and after you have done everything, to stand. Stand firm then with the belt of truth buckled around your waist. And then it goes on with some other aspects of the spiritual armor, but the belt of truth. Now, in the 2020 elections, a lot of people might say, well, let's just move on because, hey, Donald Trump was president for 4 years, and now it's his time to step aside and let someone else lead. That's naturally happens every election cycle. Some presidents win re-election, others don't. They just leave the scene, and then someone new comes on the scene. What I want to say is it's not about Donald Trump. It's not about Joe Biden at this point. It's about the truth. It's about knowing who won the 2020 presidential election. That's all it is. I just want to know. I think millions of people want to know who actually won the election. Now, we don't want to just be told that Joe Biden won by the news media. We don't want to be just told who won by the Democratic liberal operatives who control the key cities in the key swing states. We don't want to be just told by the liberal Democratic Secretary of States of the key swing states that Joe Biden won, or by the governor of these key swing states that Joe Biden beat Donald Trump in them and therefore is the president-elect. We don't want to just have someone declare that Joe Biden is the winner. We want to know if he won. We want to know if those votes were legit. We want to know if every legal vote was counted and every illegal vote was not counted. And so we want to get to the bottom of this. But I guess the entire mainstream media, they're not interested in the truth. Their guy won. Joe Biden won. They were all in the tank for Joe Biden. No question about it. The bias was so heavy. The pretense of neutrality was gone this year. There was no objective journalism. In fact, journalism today is pretty much dead. Let's be frank. It's dead. Joe Biden could say anything he wanted to during the elections, and he would get a free pass. In fact, there was a case where the reporters were trying to ask him, will you stack the courts? Will you increase the number of judges on the court and appoint 3 or 4 or 5 more judges in order to have a liberal majority once again? And he wouldn't rule it out. He said, well, I won't ask that question until after the election. And the secular media, mainstream media, I guess, were okay with that. They just moved on to the next question. What? Where is journalism? Journalism has died this year. You would never get a free pass by just saying, I won't answer that question. Yes, you have to answer that question. That's part of the election candidating process. You have to answer questions. And if you don't answer those questions, your feet will be held to the fire until you do, or you're driven out of the race. You cannot just say, I won't answer that question, and then the journalists accept it. But this year, they did. Why? Because they're all in for Joe Biden. Now, when they interview Donald Trump or when they ask him questions, oh, that's totally different. They're going to grill him and never let him off the hook on any single point. Why? Because they hate Orange Man Bad, Donald Trump. And so the bias is so clear. Well, here we are again. Election, post-election, we have all of these fraud allegations and all of these irregularities and the laws of the states being broken and all that kind of thing. And where is the news journalism? They're covering something else. They always have some other news story to tell. It's a blackout, a total post-election voter fraud blackout. It's not It's as if it's not even there. And it's the same way with the Facebook and Twitter and YouTube. They're going to fight tooth and nail to not investigate it, to not get to the bottom of this. And so what I want to do today is talk about a video that just gives one slight example of this. And this is just one of many. It isn't even something that is unusual. This is something that Dinesh D'Souza has put together, a little video clip showing the Christopher Kreff, who was recently fired because of incompetence, as he should have been. And he's going to say that there was nothing wrong with the elections of 2020 this year. In fact, it was one of the most secure elections in the history of the United States. Again, gaslighting the American public, talking down to them, talking to them like they're idiots, trying to talk to them like they're fools. And Dinesh D'Souza won't have any of it. And I will give this as an example of the spiritual battle we are facing today. So let's go ahead and bring Dinesh D'Souza up. And before I do, you might even, I might even point out another exhibit here while we're on the subject. Look at what is down here in the information below Dinesh's video. It's very interesting, isn't it? He can't even he puts a title called U.S. Elections. And what is this down here? The AP has called the presidential race for Joe Biden. See more on Google. So Google, who owns Facebook, has inserted its own editorial information down here, reminding the viewer before he even listens to this video, oh, by the way, Joe Biden actually won the election. They're telling you what to think before you even process any information. So this is what we're getting day and night, 24/7, from all the media companies, all the big tech. They're trying to tell you that Joe Biden is the winner. Don't look into any of the fraud. Don't look into any of the allegations. It's all fake news. It's all Trump's invention. It's a conspiracy theory. It's all untrue. Don't even bother thinking for yourself. We'll think for you. That's big tech. That's the media. And what is down here? It says robust safeguards help ensure the integrity of elections and the results. So they're trying to reinforce this whole idea that there's nothing to see here. There's nothing to look at. Even though all these eyewitnesses say they saw irregularities and illegalities and cheating, and the elections were not following the state laws and election laws and all this stuff. Oh, that's okay. That's, the authorities have spoken. And that's what we get 24/7. Here's Dinesh D'Souza. He says, ex-election security chief Krebs, who Trump fired, is basically a professional con man. So what does he mean by that? Let's get into this and we'll talk more about it. So let's roll that.
The Doofus and the Con Man. This video is titled The Doofus and the Con Man. The doofus is the 60 Minutes interviewer, and the con man is Christopher Krebs, who was fired by President Trump at CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Agency, for his utter incompetence in trying to oversee security in this election. So here's Krebs in this rather telling exchange, trying to defend the procedures of the election. Watch.
Voting machines corrupted by mysterious actors in Venezuela.
So again, there's no evidence that any machine that I'm aware of has been manipulated by a foreign power. Period.
Communist money from China and Cuba used to influence the election.
Look, I think we can go on and on with all the farcical claims that alleging interference in the 2020 election, but the proof is in the ballots. The recounts are consistent with the initial count, and to me, that's further evidence, that's confirmation.
Okay, I have to stop it here before Dinesh D'Souza even gets to his commentary. He's saying the proof is that if you go back and you count the ballots, then you see that the tallies in the machines match the actual physical ballots. But see, that just simply means that he has not understood the allegations of Sidney Powell, Jenna Ellis, and the others on the Trump legal defense team. They're not saying that the ballots won't match the tallies in the machines. They're saying that there is a way with these electronic voting machines to actually line up the ballots, the physical ballots, and the tallies, and that the tallies can be manipulated. And then later, because of the circumstances that there were 2, 3, 4 days later, ballots can be made to fit the tally that the manipulated data in these machines generated. So he doesn't understand the arguments of the allegations against the elections being legit. He doesn't understand. He's giving a simple answer that he thinks will convince most people, and he's just saying, well, just no. And he gives some simplistic answer, which is not an answer at all. So this is more or less propaganda.
That the systems used in the 2020 election performed as expected, and the American people should have 100% confidence in their vote.
Now, the first comical aspect of this is that the interviewer is a complete fraud. He's a doofus. He has no follow-up, no critical intelligence, nothing. He just simply poses questions and moves on to the next one. It's sort of, interviewing for dummies, you might say.
Well, I'll have to stop here. This is the tactic that we get all the time. This is the kind of spiritual warfare that they are waging against the common person in this country. What'll happen is that someone will say, hey, there were all kinds of problems, for example, at the old Cobo Hall in Detroit where there were counting. One of the problems is instead of having all of the precincts count their ballots and then send them in, they brought all the ballots to a central counting center, and they all were counted there. So they were all under the antenna and the canvas of the liberal-dominated Detroit political machine. And so all of this was under the auspices of the Democratic Party. And then what will happen is if someone questions that there wasn't everything going right there, then the Secretary of State of Michigan will say, there is no evidence for any irregularities or any voter fraud in the state. And then the governor of Michigan will say the same thing. We have no evidence of widespread voter fraud, and any accusation of voter fraud is baseless and lacking in proof. That's the standard issue talking point. Nothing more. All they have to do is put that out there, and they expect everyone to believe it, and the mainstream media goes with that.
No attempt to probe the source at all. So now let's turn to Krebs himself. And notice, for example, how weak his responses are. When he's asked straight out, is it true that these machines are controlled in foreign countries? His response is either absolutely not or ha 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 ha. This is supposed to be some form of argument. But it's really not, because it's a yes or no answer. Either they can or they can't be. Can the machines be manipulated? Well, I've seen no evidence. I've seen no evidence means you don't know. You don't know one way or the other. If the machines can be manipulated, then they're like what people in ancient times used to call false weights, which is a weighing scale that can be weighted on one side or the other. And the point is, when you have this kind of a bogus scale, you don't have to prove that it was employed in any given case. You simply have to grab the scale and notice it's not an honest scale.
Well, let me stop here. It's real simple. And Chris Kreff and the entire Homeland Security, the Department of Justice, the DOJ, a number of government police departments and law enforcement offices could simply say, we want a machine that was used in Wayne County, Michigan, for example. We want to be able to analyze it and see if any of these allegations, any of these accusations are possible with this machine. Can the tally be manipulated? Can you take a vote from Trump and put it into Biden's camp? How can they be exploited? Are these machines safe and secure? Let us have our experts to show one way or the other. They don't do that. They just simply say to the American people, everything was fine. Don't worry. Elections were the most secure in all of history. I say prove it. If it's the most secure election, prove it. Give me some statistics, not just general statements.
The Bible refers to these dishonest weights and dishonest scales about 10 times. Here's a quote from the book of Proverbs. So it's been known from ancient times that crooks can fix the way that things are weighed and measured. And that's why the Bible is emphatic about honest weights and measures. And finally, we get to sort of the coup de grace from Krebs, which I think reveals the kind of snake that he is. He basically goes, well, we know that the votes are authentic because, after all, the recounts produced a result that was sort of amazingly similar to the original count. Now, let's back up for a minute. If the argument is that illegal votes are being cast, these could be detected by signature matches, make sure that the person who signed the ballot is actually the guy who voted. None of this is even being done. It's kind of like accusing a bank of having counterfeit money, and then the bank manager goes, counterfeit money, ha 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 ha. We opened our vault and recounted all the bills. We got exactly the same answer, so there you go, no counterfeit money. So I think what is intensifying the suspicion and skepticism of reasonable people is the fact that the so-called officials in charge are obviously frauds. They have no ability to give us any reasonable assurance that these procedures were protected.
That's right. And this is all up and down the line. You have the entire Biden campaign totally wanting to move on. They have no interest in calming the fears of half of the population that voted for the opponent, Donald Trump. You know, Biden and his campaign could say, look, let's just settle this whole thing. Biden won, we believe, but let's just go into this thing, do a total forensic audit of all the votes, all the machines, just settle this thing once and for all, and then move on. No, they don't want to do that. Why don't they want to do that? The same way with the Secretary of States and the election officials and the governors and all of the officials in these swing states. They just want to move on. They don't want any investigation. They don't want to look into it. I heard the Attorney General of Michigan, after there were hearings and all of the eyewitnesses, that was all of the fraud that was happening in Wayne County, counting and processing the ballots, she said, well, if you think there's something criminal going on, just call the police. Here's the Attorney General. Gaslighting again. Just instead of saying, well, I'm interested in this, I really care about the integrity of our election, she just says, go call the police. Now, the police were there at the former Cobo Hall. They were keeping Republican poll observers outside. They were working together with the Democratic machine. So what, you call the same people that were keeping the Republicans inside, who were allowed to go inside to observe the ballot processing? They were the ones that were keeping the Republicans out. So that is just more gaslighting. That is more just stalling. That is just trying to convince you that you have a problem for questioning the integrity of the election, when in fact there is mounting evidence that this was a fraud.
Ultimately, this only intensifies our doubt and makes it convincing to us that this was not a fair election.
That's right. And the problem that we have to face now is that we have an election system that is not sound and solid. We have machines that have software in them. This is a fact. We have machines that are counting our ballots that have software in them. The DNA, the basic structure of the software that was first used to rig elections in Venezuela and other Latin American countries. That's a fact. What we need to know right now is, was the election machine used all throughout the country, was that in fact used to rig the election here in the United States. And then after the count tally was put up for everyone to see, then they went in later afterwards in secret and created the physical hard ballots to support the fraudulent vote count. That's the working theory right now, and it looks like there is evidence, growing evidence, that that's in fact happened. Now, mainstream media, like I said, the big tech companies, Facebook, Google, if you start talking about this stuff, they're going to censor you. They're going to try to take you down. If you put up a video that questions the election, they're going to put a disclaimer and say, it's already been settled, folks, Joe Biden won. This is a spiritual warfare. Again, it's not about Donald Trump winning. It's not about defeating Joe Biden. Even though I voted for Donald Trump because he represents Christian values and Christian causes better than Joe Biden by far, it's not about that anymore. It's about what the truth is. And this kind of spiritual warfare, mind control, propaganda, manipulating, misinformation, disinformation, fake news that we're getting from almost every source out there. You have to dig and search and scrap and just spend a lot of time online and outside of the internet trying to find what in fact is going on. Because these media voices and popular influence in our society, they're gaslighting you. They are trying to tell you you're crazy. You shouldn't even be questioning the results of this election. It's a done deal. What are you doing? Why don't you just admit it? You're just being a sore loser. You don't know how to lose. You're just trying to cling to something. You just got to give it up and move on and get on with life. Well, yeah, let's do that, but let's get to the truth first, okay? Let's settle what actually happened, and let's do an investigation, and let's look at the facts. But there's this rush. Whoa, we got to anoint Joe Biden as the president, and he's already the president-elect, and he's already got his office, the office of the president-elect. And, you might even have a swearing-in ceremony of the office of the president-elect. I mean, this fake news. And that's one of the reasons why something is going wrong here, when people are wanting to rush, and they don't want to look at the facts. They don't want to talk about this stuff. They want to shut you down. And we are in a spiritual warfare. So we need to pray. We need to keep our heads, the Bible says, think clearly and reflect on this and not be taken in by the propaganda that is whirling and swirling out there in society. We need to keep our eyes on the Lord Jesus Christ. And we need to ask that he expose the truth. Get to the bottom of this. Expose it. No more lies. No more smoke and mirrors. No more fog. Get to what really happened. And that's all we're saying. That's all we need to be praying for. Well, I hope that's been helpful. We'll see you back next week on another edition of Christian Answers. God bless.